Hello, I'm Jamila Jamil and welcome to I Weigh. So this next episode of In Their Shoes with Jamie Windust is such a refreshing conversation. Jamie is a writer, a cultural commentator and an I Weigh community member based in London and sits down with guests to reflect on obstacles, perseverance and spirit. It's a bit silly, it's irreverent and mostly it's just fun. And I cannot wait for you all to enjoy it. So comment below and tell me what you think.
We are complementing each other quite well here in this, what you just described as business class on a plane seating arrangement.
Yeah. You described it as 69, a professional 69.
Which is the only form of sex allowed at the moment.
Correct.
You and me, I think, have something in common, so I wanted to chat. We are very honest online, and you did interviews over the summer where you kind of really spoke about your internalized problems, not your literal...
Not my digestive tract.
IBS. But how do you feel being so honest online?
Online is this weird place where we think that the rules of real life don't apply because there's such a reduced level of accountability and I just think being honest everywhere we can is really important. Like, if we're not being honest, then like, what's the point, I think? And especially sharing honesty about, like you said, education or vulnerabilities of like what I didn't know or what I could know. I just think that if I'm learning, then maybe other people will also find that information beneficial.
Yeah, because I think people hold figures like yourself on a very large pedestal,
which they shouldn't.
Which they should never, because it creates this illusion that you are perfect, and I hate to burst your bubble.
I'm perfect. I have a webbed toe.
That's actually why I brought you here.
Yeah, you want to see what's in my shoes. See what I did there. You've
spoken about internalized transphobia before. And it confuses me that people don't talk about that enough, because we all face it. You know, even trans people face it. We feel it.
The idea of internalized transphobia, I think, is really interesting because for most of my youth, and probably up until 2014, I really suffered at the hands of that internalized transphobia and at the idea of my gender needing to fit into some predicated category. And it wasn't until I was able to understand more and learn more that I was really able to let go of probably what was the biggest struggle of my life. And despite doing drag for, now 20 years, the idea of binary gender presentation was something that held me in such a rigid box and made me feel so uncomfortable. And I wasn't even aware of it. All I was aware of was the feelings of discomfort and shame, but I didn't actually know where they came from.
Right.
And despite like really being as introspective as possible in my life, I just didn't have the language or the tools to even understand. I just accepted the reality of the world that I was presented with.
Until you know the language or even the knowledge, like before I realised that I was trans, it wasn't because I didn't know, it's because I didn't have access to
the language.
And the language or the knowledge.
And the knowledge,
people, how you've spoken about how people are really beneficial in that experience. Just seeing people just existing and having a laugh and thriving.
I was living in the US and Laverne Cox on the cover of Time magazine, the transgender tipping point. For me marks the transgender tipping point,
right,
as the title suggested. And there was a lot of other moments, but that was sort of where it really, like shows like Transparent, to a different degree, Caitlyn Jenner on the cover of Vanity Fair, reading Janet Mock's autobiography, Jenny Boylan's autobiography, Kate Bornstein's book, becoming friends with Chaz Bono after he was a judge on RuPaul's Drag Race, and getting to hang out with him was a hugely pivotal moment for me because I had grown up in an era in Sydney amongst trans women who were a product of their time, in an era where the trans identity was obviously much less spoken about, much less understood. And I grew up with a very specific type of trans woman in my environment. And I think because they were products of their environment, I struggled to empathize with their identity and in wanting that for myself.
Right, yeah, because if it's that idea of if there's a negative or very one-sided image of what transness looks like,
Yeah.
and then you are sat there, or anyone is sat there and thinking I might be trans, and your only image is of this kind of very different life that you have, it can feel a bit kind of bizarre.
And I think that example was also like transness forced aggressively into the binary. And also those women were pioneers and were heroes because they walked around in society being extremely visually different, and just going to the shops to buy some milk.
Yeah.
You had to be faced with looks and judgments and explanations of who you are, and trying to just validate the reasons you existed. And I think for me, I was so afraid to examine my gender identity for most of my life because I was worried that I was trans, and because of that transphobia, I was scared to even look at that.
Yeah.
I had just moved to Los Angeles, and I was being celebrated for my femininity, whereas in Sydney, as a drag performer, my femininity was almost not a positive side. It was like
really?
higher eyebrows, bigger hair, more makeup, crazier costumes.
Very binary, very over the top.
Yeah, very drag.
Fine, yeah.
And I was more sort of femme presenting, and that wasn't seen as a positive. And then in Los Angeles, I was wearing my human hair wigs and gorgeous little dresses, and all the gay boys celebrated me, and then there was so much attention from also like the straight identifying guys who worked in the gay scene, and I use the term gay as opposed to queer, in West Hollywood.
We heard.
I remember having these like feelings inside of that, like it was bubbling up, and I was like, oh god, what does this mean? And I talked to Vanity, and I called her with the intention of coming out as trans, even though I hadn't actually examined. I was too scared to even consider what the truth might be. And through the conversation of actually having the balls to examine the topic, and having that trusted space, I got to the end of the conversation and I was like, oh wait, I don't want to be a woman.
Yeah.
And there was this real sense of relief where I realised that for so long I thought that the only options were being a man,
Absolutely.
which I was failing at,
Yeah.
and being a woman, which although I enjoyed sort of being Courtney, it didn't feel like I wanted to just be that,
Exactly.
or just be this.
It's so freeing, isn't it? Once you have that knowledge.
Yeah.
And just being able to be like, actually, I can just
be me.
Yeah, navigate the middle ground.
Yeah.
Or just navigate no ground.
Interestingly, after that, although I felt like I know what I'm not, I still didn't know what I was, and I didn't have the language for it.
Right.
It was through conversations with Chaz that I actually... we would have a lot of conversations about gender and why I did drag, and he was, I think, unbeknownst to me, was sort of tiptoeing me through my own journey.
And what a man to do that.
Yeah.
Just for your life, just to be like, I have Cher's
son
here guiding me through my identity.
I totally forget that he's Cher's son. And he was like, oh, do you want to come see my mum sing on Monday night? And I was like, I want to come see your mum. She's like singing karaoke down the pub. And then I was like, oh
my God.
Okay, yeah, right. And so we went along to Dancing with the Stars and watched his mum sing.
Just his mum.
Yeah.
You know, you mentioned Dancing with the Stars there. I really want to talk to you about. And that is literally my life goal, to be semi-recognisable enough that I could go on Strictly.
It's a marvellous experience. We were the first same-sex coupling anywhere in the English-speaking world. Although I visually we were an opposite gender couple, because I was Courtney. There was a point
you
where...
did like a transformation halfway through, didn't you?
Where I started the dance as Courtney and finished as Shane. And the nation loved it. Like, I think people really loved the art and the storytelling.
Oh, yeah. You often describe Courtney and Shane as two ends of the same stick.
Yeah.
But what I want to know is, do you ever get like pissed off with Courtney because people then don't necessarily know Shane?
After Australian Idol, when I was 21, where I was jealous of Courtney and angry at Courtney. That was this weird, like, internal battle going on.
Love that.
I know. And then I went to a therapist and she pointed out, not only are we the same person, so it's slightly queer to be battling inside your own head, but she also pointed out that actually Courtney was a mask that gave me an increased amount of anonymity compared to the other kids who I was on Idol with, and that perhaps I should celebrate and be appreciative of that. Doing drag and being Courtney has been, for the longest time, was a socially acceptable way for me to express my femininity.
Right.
And as a boy, that wasn't ever available. And I was always trying to perform masculinity, sort of unbeknownst to me, but now looking back, I recognize, especially like when flirting with boys, I would always like try and butch it up.
Oh yeah, I've been known, even when I'm wearing a flat shoe, I widen my stance.
Yeah. And it's funny because you catch yourself doing it, and I feel daft, but I just understand that that's the world that we were socialized in. And it's all about recognizing those moments and understanding that what truly connects is authenticity, and that the performance in a disingenuous way will always leave you short. And when I finally learnt through, when Chaz said to me, you know, have you heard this term gender fluid? And I was like, no, what's that mean? He's like, well, it's just the idea that it's okay for boys to be feminine and it's okay for girls to be masculine. And it's so obvious and it's so simple,
right,
but it literally had never occurred to me.
When I talk to people about gender fluidity or being non-binary, they think it's very specific just for us. But actually deconstructing those huge entities helps people of all genders, because cis men won't feel as pressured to conform. Same for cis women.
I'd argue that the whole conversation around the trans identity and non-binary identities benefits cis heterosexual men most of all, because they're in the most rigid cages of identity, and it is that inflexibility that manifests as all of the negative things we see in the world.
Yeah, it's men.
It's men.
Go. In a post-apocalyptic world, Uggs or heels?
Heels.
What ones?
Well, maybe something that's like combat boot heel.
A buffalo heel. Penguins or wallabies?
Wallabies.
Why?
Although those gay ones are really cute.
Gay wallabies?
Gay penguins.
Gay penguins?
Yeah, I'm sure there's gay wallabies. I mean, that tail is a giant phallus.
Where's the place we least want hair to grow?
Your eyeballs?
Laugh, crying or cry laughing?
Oh, the second one.
Cry
laughing.
Because you're so happy you're crying.
Yeah.
Share with Josh's bottom. Josh off of
Dancing with the Stars.
Dancing with the Stars off of the bum. Or Josh with Cher's voice.
Cher's bottom and Josh's bottom might be similar. I'd say that Josh's is quite much larger.
Ooh la la.
So I'll go with Cher with Josh's bottom.
How's the book writing going?
Look.
Stressed?
Yeah. I once did the AIDS life cycle from San Francisco to Los Angeles, which is like a week-long bike ride.
Wow.
And by 11 a.m. on the first day, it was the most I had ever ridden a bicycle in my entire life.
Don't lie.
It's true. I think you're making a double entendre
of
bicycles. And I feel a bit like that with the book, where I embarked on this journey unknowing and unwittingly about how actually big and long it was.
What's the name of the book? We're allowed to know.
It's called It's All an Act. Because it is.
That's funnier than mine.
Yours is cute. I like that. In their shoes. I've got my buffalo boots on, which are actually an important part of my identity. There's a band called the Spice Girls. You might have heard of them being played at retro nights or something like that. And the Spice Girls used to wear buffalo boots, these big platform shoes, which were not commercially available, but there was one brand, and I went on a trip to Melbourne with my family, and I bought a pair of buffalo boots because the Spice Girls wore them, and then I took them. They were much more colourful than these. They were like, had reflectors.
Did they used to like be literally like this?
They were. I think they might have been like a little bit bigger than this at a suburban state school where I chose to wear them. They were not normal.
It blew minds.
It blew minds. And in writing my book, my buffalo boots keep coming up consistently of like part of my identity that I was wearing, because they were always like, I was in their shoes, there being the Spice Girls, and there was something
God, I bet they're good.
so empowering. Like, I knew that I was different and I
Yeah.
was being treated differently. And so I used the visual parts of my identity to be as different as possible.
That's
So-
been a very consistent theme, actually, throughout all of the guests here. It's bizarre because it highlights you as someone that is different, but also the intention behind it isn't to be like, look at me, it's to be like, I'm escaping something or I'm just having fun.
Yeah, and for me, I think a part of it was also giving them something to focus on that wasn't the truth of who I was.
Yeah,
It was something that I was choosing for them to mock,
to look at, yeah.
which just felt safer than them just mocking who I was. I was like, no, you can mock my headgear, you can mock my buffalo shoes, you can mock my Woody Woodpecker hat or my wheelie bag that I strut around the school with.
Nothing on me.
No.
There we go. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I love you.
Thank you, I love you too. It's lovely to talk to you and I can't wait to read your book.